Liz Crosby here with some yogic philosophy. And today I'll be talking about what it means to embody the divine masculine. This is coming up a lot, especially since we have a full moon coming up in Aries. We have Chiron in Aries, long-standing, and we also have Mars in Aries. So in preparation for the full moon at the end of this week, I think that this is a very worthy download to tune into. So, divine masculine energy comes from solar plexus. Each of the chakras, although it is important to balance the masculine and the feminine aspects of each and every chakra, the chakras 1 through 6 impart predominantly a masculine or feminine energy that can be utilized alchemically. So solar plexus is predominantly masculine. It's really easy to remember too. Root chakra is masculine, sacral chakra is feminine. Solar plexus is masculine, heart chakra is feminine, throat chakra is masculine, brow chakra is feminine. And then, of course, when you get to crown chakra, you have an even balance between both, which allows the energy to travel through because we are androgynous beings energetically. And the chakra system is essentially the electromagnetic spectrum, right? So Roy G. Biv, easy to remember the colors too. It's Roy G. Biv. So it's a nice, neat little package. Solar plexus is also associated with tapas, and I just finished tapas in my niyama series. So kind of while we're immersed in it, let's dive deeper philosophically. And this is all the stuff that I don't always have time to enumerate when I am teaching the alignment and the sequencing in all of the classes. So this is a special treat. It does involve some mental gymnastics, but it will be worthwhile to integrate into your physical practice and into your meditation. So solar plexus is actually associated with Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. And so I'm going to utilize the Bhagavad Gita to expound upon divine masculine energy. And the common question in the yoga community is, why is there a sacred text in which the setting is a battlefield if the science of yoga is to attain peace and tranquility? The reason is it is a metaphor. And so the battlefield, which is the battlefield of Kurukshetra in the Bhagavad Gita, is symbolic for your sphere of existence. And solar plexus is Arjuna, our protagonist in the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna is tasked with fighting his own family. And he's given the option to choose either Krishna or Krishna's army. And he makes the wise decision and chooses Krishna because love always wins, and Krishna is really love. Krishna is spirit. Krishna is breath. Air element is the element of heart chakra. And so what do we have between these two characters in the story of the Bhagavad Gita? We have the two Rajas gunas, to relate back to a recent video I just did on the gunas. The Rajas gunas are the transformative elements. They help us to rearrange the tamas gunas so that we can process with the sattvic gunas the new storylines that we're creating for ourselves, right? One script, universe. And so although we can be the multiverse, we have to actually take it upon ourselves to rearrange our tamas gunas to change the script into a higher or lower possible world frequency. And so therefore, it makes a tremendous amount of sense if you know this. If you've read the Bhagavad Gita and you didn't know that, it might be somewhat complex. You might have been able to surmise some things, some esoteric knowledge from even just reading the dialogue between Arjuna and Krishna, but without knowing that Krishna is breath and Arjuna is your inner fire, it doesn't really make all that much sense. You can definitely relate the allegories to your interpersonal relationships, your nuclear family, and how you go about your day-to-day life. But what we're really talking about here is the alchemical process. So what does the fire do? The fire burns away the impurities so that the breath can reactivate the nadis. I'm sure you guys have all heard me say that phrase at least once. I say it so many times I've lost track. I'm sure by the time I impart ways with this body, I will have said it at least couple million times. Because that's really it. That is the alchemical process. But of course, there is this hesitance, this resistance that we experience. And so you can definitely relate to Arjuna's character in that we all have these drawbacks, our unwillingness to light ourselves on fire internally. And he puts up a couple arguments, and of course he approaches it like a didactic argument, not like most people perceive argumentative experiences today, wherein it's all about winning. He's open-minded and he's willing to listen to what Krishna has to say. Because obviously Arjuna's tendency is to not fight. And I like to joke the Bhagavad Gita is when he chooses to fight. And what do we have in the West? We have Hamlet, and Hamlet chooses, he doesn't even have interaction with the breath, right? He doesn't even have interaction with the Akashic, with the ethereal realm. So we all know how that ends. So, but the same question is implied. Oh boy, how many times has humanity heard this phrase? To be or not to be? That is the question. And Arjuna puts it to Krishna time and time again. And so Arjuna's main argument is, well, he has a few arguments, is if I go inwards, will I lose my capacity to appreciate the external reality with my senses? Will my senses become diminished? And Krishna says, no, quite the contrary, your senses will become spiritualized. And actually, that has to do with shedding away the dead snakeskin, right? And releasing the attachment to Maya is actually feeling and sensing with all of your senses at their most amplified state, the attachment. And then once you've felt it to such a great extent, then you're released from it and you're no longer tethered to it. And it's no longer something that rules you and governs each and every one of your actions, your behavioral patterns. So no, it is not dull your senses, and quite the contrary, it amplifies your senses so that you can experience things. And we even see this with science, right? When we go back for more and more and more, they call that in economics the law of diminishing returns. And you see this in your neurochemical patterns as well. The neurotransmitters that fire no longer have the same response. And then, of course, we need to consume more to elicit the same neurochemical response. And so I always tell people with kundalini, even though it is the best thing you've ever experienced or never experienced until you experience it, nonetheless, it is not like sense-object gratification in that it is the exact opposite of law of diminishing returns. Because as you continue to learn how to conduct more kundalini energy through your central axis, it is increasingly more sensational, more blissful, more pleasurable, dare I say. Oh, that word does have its connotations. So that argument is completely logically dismissed. And then Arjuna moves on to say, well, you know, they're not so bad, the dark spots in my field of consciousness, or battle of Kurukshetra, if you will. And, you know, they're kind of like roommates, you know, they're not that bad. I don't mind having them in my field. They're there. Not a big deal. Krishna says, well, if you could see what the dark spots in your field, again, we're talking about in terms of fire and air, and not only is air a Raja's guna, is also a sattvic guna, because it does relate to ether, and so we are able to access the Akashic records, and when we are able to access the Akashic records, we can see, we have our ability to time travel into the past, into the future, and actually witness with how the distortion causes the kundalini energy to deviate from the central axis, the Sushumna channel, and then therefore how that causes pain and suffering ongoing into the future and ongoing into the past. And given enough time, those stagnant points of energy that aren't receiving the light of solar plexus do eventually accumulate enough stagnant energy wherein it precipitates into an unwanted event, whatever that may be, depending upon the individual and the entity or emotion, energy in motion in their field, his or her field. And so, therefore, no, Krishna says you are going to want to expel, to evacuate those roommates. You don't want to keep them in your field, most definitely not. So, oh man, and roundabout towards the middle of the Bhagavad Gita, finally Arjuna is coming to his wits, and he's starting to become more willing to fight against his own family. And he asks Krishna if he can see Krishna in his true state. And you have to remember, again, Krishna is the breath, and the breath is also our transcendence. It is the gateway to the sattvic gunas, the throat chakra, brow chakra, sound, and light. And so this is our infinite nature, essentially. And we do have our work to do. We have our work cut out for us in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, in each our own sphere of existence. And to see all of it all at once is really overwhelming. So honestly, this part of the Bhagavad Gita becomes kind of a lesson in how we should go about approaching each our own battle of Kurukshetra, just bit by bit. And our mind is finite, so we don't need to see it all at once, even though it is all happening all in the now. And of course, not long after Krishna takes on his true form, Arjuna pleads with him to go back to his avatar form. And this is also very telling too, right? Even Krishna is still considered to be an avatar and not necessarily the infinite. And the infinite is so almighty and so powerful and so vast that we can't really perceive it with our finite selves in this day and age, especially emerging out of Kali Yuga. And so the Battle of Kurukshetra is, in essence, holding space in each our own spheres. And we are constantly in rectangular buildings for the most part, and that's pretty much worldwide. You see rectangular buildings everywhere. And of course, in ancient civilization, we had triangular buildings, so pyramids. And of course, the pyramid is one of the most energetically efficient structures. And so how we go about filling out our sphere of existence is with these triangular shapes. And you see that directly with the asana, especially some of the most prominently well-known asanas, such as triangle pose, right? Pyramid pose, there's twisted triangle, there's side angle, right? And so even when you aren't doing a triangular shape, so to speak, say you're doing like a handstand or something, you still are thinking in terms of triangles and weaving energy in terms of triangles as you isometrically pull energy up. And isometric engagement, it forms a triangle energetically, right? Like an isosceles triangle. And so I like to joke that the Bhagavad Gita, it's why you want to be a G. Bhagavad Gita, this is my own inside joke that I'm sharing with you guys. Because really, in essence, we are filling out geometric forms, geometry, polygons. This is why the asana is actually important, guys. And it kills me when people are turned off because of culturally appropriated yoga, because we cannot get around the universal laws, and we do actually have to hold space. And speaking of Mars being retrograde in Aries, Mars is heavily associated with iron. The iron energy is heavily associated with war, because iron is usually what we crafted our weapons out of, especially our more primitive weapons when we're still fighting with arrows and swords and knives and whatnot. And so iron is most definitely associated with Aries, who is considered to be the god of war, and Aries is the home base for Mars, of course. So that being said, our oxygenated blood flow, our cardiovascular system, is also dense with iron. And this is where our air element hitches a ride. And so hopefully this is all starting to sink in, the importance of solar plexus and engaging with our mental faculties to maneuver our body in space. And now you're starting to see how it is very, very much like a war, in that you are invoking your muscles to engage or to relax, finding this equal balance between sthira and sukha, strength and flexibility, agonist muscles, antagonist muscles, so that you can optimize your space holding potential in your sphere of existence. And again, the nadis, the energetic tubular channels that are unseen, we know what they are though, and most definitely you've seen them. The flower of life and the Sri Yantra are 2D symbols that represent our universal grid that involves, again, the maximum space holding potential. We're infinite, so we can always continue to scrape away at karmic residue, and we can always continue to expand from the center. But that's it. That is the bare bones of our energetic field, of our energetic tubular channels. That is the map. That is the map back to the new world. And it is our job to figure out how to get this flesh suit, this meat suit, into that formation. Of course, we can't hold all of that space all at once. We're not the blueberry girl and Willy Wonka in the chocolate factory. So we have to hold sacred geometric shapes. And again, the triangles are the key. And you see this in the symbolism surrounding alchemy, right? To emerge out of the rectangle, you become the triangle. And then you do overlaying triangles to become the sphere. This is why the Sri Yantra is commonly depicted with a circle around it. And if you were to juxtapose all of the poses that you did in hopefully a well-sequenced class, it would look like or resemble the Sri Yantra. And the Sri Yantra is kind of like the Star of David, the overlaying upwards and downwards pointing triangles. Of course, there's more than two, but that is the map. That is our map back home to high vibrational frequency, living in harmony with Mother Earth, civilization, and our next evolutionary step as a species. And so if one of us decides to do this work, then we're all going to make it, because we're all the same self. So, and I know that there are plenty of starseeds that are committed to doing this inner work, and they're up for the task. The kundalini energy, as it starts barreling through, because I do want to give you a little light at the end of the tunnel, because it does seem like a lot of work, right? Looking at the flower of life or the Sri Yantra can be really intimidating. But do know that once you've scraped away enough samskaras, that the kundalini current starts flowing through on a regular basis, and it makes for a most blissful experience. So kind of harping on that Capricorn stellium while it is still in existence before it breaks up. Capricorn being associated with being the hardest working sign of the zodiac. The trick is we learn to love our work. And the goat ascends the inner summit. So, kind of just taking it bit by bit and not being too, again, love always wins the war. But if you lose a battle here and there, that's okay. Know that you are on the side of love when you choose to actually invoke the Rajas gunas and actively participate. You don't have to, again, fill out the whole flower of life in a day. In fact, please don't. That might actually be painful. You want to take your time. And when you really think about it, we spent centuries, millennia accumulating these karmas. And even if you are a walk-in, or if you incarnated for one life here to impart knowledge from a starseed location, and nonetheless, you have inherited a human body. And so by inheriting a human body, you get to survey the field. And the whole of our human history is embedded into the very fabric of our being. And so what we are seeking to achieve is, again, the universal grid, flower of life, Sri Yantra, and it could be considered to be the crystalline structure, right? Because it looks kind of like the crystals, the polygons that form in crystals. And what is the crystalline structure but Christ consciousness? And again, the term Christ sounds very similar to Krishna. And if you look at their history, Krishna and Christ have a very similar upbringing, a very similar event pattern in their lives. And some people believe that they are one and the same, just incarnations in different cultures. And so this is it. We are atoning at one. We are atoning for all of the sins of humanity by choosing to do this work. And it's easier to let it go when you acknowledge that, again, it is just physics. And when you look at the dilapidation that has taken place over Kali Yuga, what have we been doing? Through the societal contract, we have all decided to stand and sit upright predominantly. And that has caused the energy to become stifled in the lowermost chakras. Because where is the power center? It's exactly in your navel, which is why the Vitruvian Man by Leonardo da Vinci, the celestial being, when he's a circle, right? And his arms out, of course, he just draws one pose because he wants to draw the hair follicles and the ab definition, but it is symbolic for the overlay of the flower of life to eventually become the sphere. The very center of the circle is his navel. And so the solar plexus, it finds its origin in the lumbar spine. And because we all stand and sit upright for the greater part of our day, all of our energy from our power center is navigating straight down through the lower abdominals, the pelvic bowl, through the legs, and then rooting and rebounding. And by the time it comes back up through the solar plexus, the rebounding wave of energy is significantly less powerful. And so the upper half of our body has been rendered less powerful. And the upper half of the body is considered to be the feminine side, just as the right side is the masculine, the left side is the feminine. And of course, most people are right-handed. The lower half is masculine, the upper half is feminine. And so you see this diminishment of power within. And, you know, all of you ladies that are seeking equality between the sexes, I commend you for all of the work that you're doing. But honestly, I think that the greatest change that we will see is if we find the balance within ourselves. So finding an equality between the right and the left, and also top, bottom, and also right, front and back. So same thing. The front side of our body is considered to be masculine, right? It's very extroverted, like when we do back bends, and then the back half of the body is considered to be feminine. And so we pay our back half little regard. And when you do forward folds, it's very introverted. So there you have it. The sexism that's embedded in the very fabric of our being and its representation as it manifests in our physical forms. So you can see how there's a common denominator there, and it is prevalent across the board based upon how we conduct our human physical vessels in space. And it continues to reinforce these limiting thought forms as a collective culturally. If we want to see actual real change, we need to actually change how we conduct our physical bodies. So year is 2020, 2 + 2 is 4. Root chakra has a square in its yantra, and the square is signifying the base, the foundation. Also, all of the chakras have downward pointing triangles in their yantra, which is their 2D visual resemblance. And that is significant because it is indicative of how we send the energy down from our solar plexus towards the foundation. So I'm explaining to you on a much more scientific and maybe even also just fundamental level how we can integrate this symbolism that we have from the Bhagavad Gita into our very physical practice. So what do we do to light a region of the microcosm on fire? We make that part of the physical body the foundation. And so often when we think of root chakra, again, this is all kind of hopefully starting to seep in and how we need to kind of shift our perspective, both literally and figuratively. We always associate root chakra with the legs, with the feet, and with the femur bone and the sciatic nerve and all of that. And really, that's just the foundation that we have been mentally conditioned to accept as the only foundation or the most regular foundation. So in order to activate the uppermost chakras, we make our head the foundation. We make our forearms the foundation. We make our hands the foundation. And in so doing, we run that energetic current, and it gets a double dose. It gets 2 waves of fire to purify those nadis. That will create structural integrity so that you have the masculine supporting the feminine in the bend. And so often, this happens all the time, because when yoga was introduced to the West, it was introduced to Hollywood starlets like Audrey Hepburn and Marilyn Monroe. I would not be surprised if this was orchestrated. Nonetheless, we got to work with what we got to work with, because it is what it is. It became known to be a very feminine attribute, a feminine endeavor, a feminine pastime, and it kind of became pigeonholed as a female extracurricular. And so, or form of fitness, which is also a little bit of a misnomer. I'll get into it. We still want the fitness, we still want to generate the tapas, but we need to utilize it for spiritual means, not necessarily to create the body image that we're seeking to attain based upon mental conditioning from mainstream media, MSM. So again, we're going to see the idealization of beauty change. I'm really excited for that, into a more androgynous being that's carrying both the masculine and the feminine aspects, but not like some Hollywood movie actor trying to be both masculine and feminine, like actually being able to do a powerful handstand, but also bend into a very deep back bend. That type of balance between masculine and feminine, right? Strength and flexibility. And so we are on our way, and there is definitely already an army assembling, so to speak, for Mother Earth on her behalf to run this energy. And if you're listening to this video, you very well could be one of these light workers. They say that there's 144,000 of us, and there are 144,000 nadis, so within, without. And these beings, they really, again, they have their work cut out for them. There's a lot of karmas in this particular species that need to be reviewed and fully processed. And again, I really wanted to also emphasize that there is a cross between the physical and the spiritual, and you start to see that very much so as you invert more often. Because of course, the uppermost chakras are much more esoteric, they're much more subtle, and when you invert, again, you activate them. And so you start to activate your own inner technology. Think of yourself as like a plant, and so often people are now gravitating to plant medicine these days. And I fully commend it. I highly suggest that you try it out, of course, under the right circumstances with the right person guiding you. But do also, if you do utilize them, and even if you don't, start to think about how you can access these psychic nadis of your own accord without having to rely upon plant medicine, so that you can do essentially a purge cycle on a regular basis, right? You don't want to have to, I know that there's a funny JP Sears video where he's talking about vining every weekend, but you don't want to wait for the weekend. Like you want to be able to hit it every day, and maybe sometimes multiple times a day, have a little purge session, because it is the great purge. We're here. It's I think most people know that 2012 was actually in 2020, and the Mayan calendar was, it wasn't off. It was the Gregorian calendar that was off by 8 years. So we're here. This is the end of the old world, and it's the beginning of the new earth. And we are definitely experiencing environmental pressure, which is perfectly normal. It comes with evolution. And it is very much, there's that Pluto and Capricorn do or die, right? So if we don't do this, then there are other forces at work that will take over, and we're not going to talk about that because it's not worth our energy, and we don't want to attract it. So we're going to focus on rebuilding the new and constructing the temple for spirit. And so again, this also has, I love it because there's so many cultural references, and you can draw the lines and juxtapose between. And in the book of Revelation, they talk about how the temple will be destroyed and then rebuilt. And what I'm trying to tell you is that you are that temple. I am that temple. We are that temple. And the temple is not a structure outside of the self, and you'll probably see something like that happen because a lot of the powers that be are trying to utilize biblical prophecy to manipulate the masses. But it's internal, and that's why it cannot be stopped. And there are enough of us on planet Earth that are willing to do this work. And it's okay if people are not willing. Be okay with that, because Chiron is in Aries and it is go time. We cannot lose energy trying to persuade people. If they're in denial still, they're in denial. You know, we need to rebuild the pyramids. That's why we're here. And we've got to lead by example. Trust me, coming from someone who worked so diligently, I really worked my butt off trying to persuade people to do this work for, I would say, about 8 years. In 2012, 8 years ago, that was about when my kundalini first started firing massively. I knew then that it was physics because it was undeniable, but I still kept trying to get a community behind me and to build a team of yogi Jedi to do this work with me. And what I'm telling you is I am going to push through now as a solo summit, and I'm okay with that. I'm totally okay with that, and I love it. Don't cry for me, Argentina. I have a lot of fun in the Akashic Records. I have a lot of fun with astral projection, so I am most definitely not alone. And I am also having so much fun teaching all my classes now. I don't have to worry about getting reported for teaching handstands. Yes, that's a thing that happened. So hopefully we can get the whole community up and running. And again, the true battle is inside. But what we've got to pay attention to is what is our Achilles heel. Again, based upon the societal contract, our Achilles heel, if we invert, the heel becomes the hand, in particular the wrist. And the wrist is associated with Gemini. And Gemini is the intellectual of the zodiac, so it fulfilled its purpose. And what do we do with our wrist? We type on the keyboard. It's about transference of information. And then before that, we wrote with the pen, and before that, even the quill. So the transference of information was absolutely necessary, because what do I always say? T-Rex didn't understand metaphysics. So even though we may still resemble T-Rex a little bit with the shorter arms and legs, it's okay, guys. We're going to grow out of this. We're going to evolve out of this, and, buckle in. We might have to do it over the course of a couple lifetimes, and that is okay. But we know our work beyond a reasonable doubt that it is plain and simple physics. And the rest will follow. Trust me, when I first realized it was all just physics, I myself was immensely disconcerted because that was not my favorite class. Sagittarius stellium here. I did not like physics at all. Despised it, actually. So it was like, no, please tell me it's not physics. No, this is a good thing. We know our work. And now I find solace in it. Now I'm actually, my soul is assuaged, even during these trying times. I know that we're going to emerge out of this with flying colors and all of the colors, right? All of the chakras illuminated, and all of the colors blending together into one. So it is happening, and I am telling you, it is worth the fight. But especially as we move towards the full moon in Aries, conjunct Chiron and Mars, save all of your energy for the battle within. Don't let anyone else's energy affect or disturb your inner peace. Don't let anyone else steal the energy that you need to invoke those Rajas gunas and to actively participate in expansion of consciousness, spirit, through sacred geometric form embodiment in your own sphere of existence. And don't you think that because you're not doing handstands, it doesn't count. Every little bit counts. We are all energetically connected. Absolutely, each and every one of us is the same consciousness experiencing itself. So we are all linked together energetically. Even if you're moving a little bit deeper in triangle pose, that still helps our collective. It still raises the collective vibrational frequency. And what we are experiencing is a planetary ascension. So, join the team, join the side that is indeed metaphysically, mathematically certain to win. And that is love. Not just any love, not the washed out Western version of love, but alchemical love, right? So embodiment of the universal laws. So hopefully this was beneficial. Hopefully this kind of cleared some things up, because I know that these phrases are being tossed around a lot, that we are in a spiritual war. What does that exactly mean? And armor up in the armor of God, like what does that mean? And we're seeing the divine feminine rising. How do we do this? Again, the masculine is absolutely necessary to create the scaffolding. So I like to reference the Sri Yantra more so in likeness to the masculine aspect, and the flower of life more so in reference to the feminine aspect, because you want to be the straight line first so that you can support the bend in all orientations with respect to gravity, being both the masculine and the feminine within, as opposed to the culturally indoctrinated belief system that we're supposed to be either predominantly masculine or predominantly feminine based upon our gender or our sexual orientation. So hopefully you enjoyed listening to my ramblings about what it means to embody the divine masculine, and I hope that you integrate it into your practice. We'll have more YouTube videos coming up throughout the week, so let me know down below if you have any requests, and we'll focus on embodying that divine masculine energy so that we're well prepared for what's coming next, because it's going to be a T-square towards the Capricorn stellium, which is really a huge drive, push, the great push into the great purge. So I'm excited though. I'm really excited for everyone to start working as conscious creators and facilitating this change, this evolution. So thank you for listening in, and I hope you have a lovely, lovely day. Lokaha samasta sukhino bhavantu. Om shanti, shanti, shantihi.